Look at the difference, this is using the wrist, and this is using the fingers. Today, we're going to cover the backhand system first, and then we'll discuss how to generate friction so you can loop against heavy underspin. First, let's talk about the backhand system. This applies to short and pips out players too, as the core principles are very similar. The first principle of the backhand, whether you're punching or ripping the ball, is that it must come from your body. The key is the form of your body and hand. A common mistake is that when you try to add power, the ball goes long. To fix this, use your body to shield your backhand. The first key is to create a C shape with your body. Keep your racket in front of you. If it's too close to your stomach, you'll get jammed on your backhand. You must engage your core and keep your hand out front to rip or punch the ball. This makes your backhand solid. Otherwise, your opponent will hit right through you in just a couple of shots. The second issue is twisting the hips too much when ripping the ball, which is a common problem. This happens when your hips aren't engaged. On your backhand stroke, you must keep your hips braced and tight. If your hips and body are loose, it means your core isn't stable, causing you to lose balance and make errors when you try to generate power. The third point is your shoulders. When they are positioned correctly like this, your opponent can't hit through you. The incorrect way is to not bring your shoulders in. When your opponent hits to a wider angle, your posture breaks, and you'll be overpowered in 2 shots. So for the backhand, you must keep your shoulders rounded in, using your center of gravity to cover every shot. You have to maintain this form. If your shoulders are open like this, you'll be beaten easily. So, always keep your shoulders contained as you address the ball. The second major point is adjusting your grip between forehand and backhand. Your grip should favor your forehand for forehand strokes, and your backhand for backhand strokes. I adjust using my middle and index fingers. For shakehand players, the first key is to move your thumb up from the rubber to a higher position on the blade for the backhand. The second key point when ripping the ball is that the V shape of your grip must point forward. I'll do it slowly. The V points forward on the backswing, and it's still pointing forward at the end of the follow-through. If your V grip points in the wrong direction, the ball will go out. To loop or rip effectively, the V must face forward. This will give you the confidence to hit with power. The third key point is to cock your wrist inward. During the backswing, at contact, and at the finish, the wrist remains cocked. Think about a professional's backhand rip. They almost always do it with the wrist cocked and the racket head dropped. Why drop the racket head? Because it generates more spin. The faster your racket head speed, the higher the linear velocity, and the spinnier the ball. If you want to master the rip, whether you're penhold or shakehand, you need to feel like you're doing a banana flick off the table. I don't recommend ripping with this kind of racket face. That angle is better suited for hitting or punching. To rip the ball, especially for penholders in a topspin rally, you have a huge advantage because you can really accelerate your racket head. So when you rip, let the racket head drop slightly, let it initiate the swing, and then accelerate through with brushing action. A ball ripped this way will be both fast and spinny. Looping a backspin ball on the backhand is the most difficult shot in the amateur's backhand arsenal. Many amateur players keep their racket head pointing up, whereas mine is dropped down. Now let her try dropping the racket head to brush the ball. Whether it's pure backspin or side spin, she can lift it. With the same motion and brushing technique, the key is the racket head. The same principle applies to the forehand. If the racket head is up, the ball goes down. If it's dropped, you can loop it up. This tip is a game changer. At the moment of contact, your wrist must be dropped, not angled up, even on a high ball. Even when attacking a high ball, keep your wrist below your forearm. That's how you generate topspin. Many players can't attack high balls on their backhand, unless they just punch it. If you want to brush this kind of ball, you'll never succeed with a horizontal blade. You can only do it by letting the racket head drop to meet the ball. From a side view, the racket head is pointing up. Even with an upward swing, you're hitting the bottom half of the ball, so its trajectory will be forward and down. But if you drop the racket head and use it to create the arc, you will get the trajectory needed to clear the net. This necessary arc, or trajectory, is generated by that snap of the dropped racket head. If you only use your arm, even if the motion is upward, the ball's trajectory off the racket is downward. It will hit the net unless you use extreme force. The trajectory is created by the racket head. As soon as I rotate my racket head, the ball naturally gets an arc. Against a topspin ball, it doesn't matter as much. You can keep the racket head fixed and still get the ball on the table. The key is dealing with backspin, especially when receiving serve. When you use a flat racket face against backspin, you're contacting the bottom of the ball. No matter how much you swing up, the ball's trajectory will be downward. At contact, you're not muscling a heavy spin ball up with your arm. Brushing the ball is a very light and delicate action. The problem most players have is they think their backswing is low enough. But at contact, the racket head is still pointing up because they rush the shot. Let me show you the difference with and without using the racket head. Without it, it's hard. With it, it's simple. Whether serving or looping, true power comes from the racket head, not the arm. If you hold my arm, I can't break free with arm strength, but I can still generate force by snapping the racket head. This proves its power is superior. This is why amateurs feel they're using a lot of force, yet the ball has no spin or speed. The reason is you haven't focused your power at the head of your racket. Watch, when I accelerate using the racket head, the ball gets incredible spin. If I use my arm at the same speed, it might look similar, but the difference in spin is night and day. For a forehand loop against backspin, you must drop the racket head down and then rotate it upwards. This is how you utilize the racket head's action. It's the same for a backhand loop, drop it down, then rotate up. For a hook serve, to get that friction, you need to bring the racket vertical and chop down. By dropping the racket and brushing upwards, you create the necessary conditions for friction. Let's take a push for example. Watch these two different preparations. Which of these racket angles allows for friction? In this first example, the wrist is maxed out. There's no room to brush the ball. So, it's the preparation that matters. Only with the correct setup can you then rotate the racket head. Remember, you can only generate spin if you can properly rotate the racket head. The same principle applies to the backhand. Look at these two examples, which one makes it easier to generate spin? In the first one, there's no room to create friction because the wrist is already fully flexed. Only with the preparation in the second example do you have the ability to rotate the racket head effectively. Alright, let me demonstrate looping a backspin ball again. Pay attention to which backswing makes it easier to lift the ball. Here's the first backswing. And here's the second one. It's the second one, right? Let me show you up close. Here's the first. And here's the second. You have to get that racket head rotating. If you do that, the ball will spin. So, when should you use this racket head action? Against a fast topspin ball, you don't have time for a big brushing motion. Instead, you generate quality by closing your racket angle and using the opponent's pace. However, against a slower backspin ball, that's your chance to really rotate the racket head and generate heavy spin. If you try to use a big racket head rotation against a fast ball, you'll get jammed, and the ball will just skid off your rubber. When you want to hit for pure power, like a smash, you must keep the racket angle stable. Don't add extra finger or wrist action. Against fast topspin, keep your racket face stable. Don't flick your wrist or rotate the racket head unnecessarily, it will only lead to unforced errors. The heavier the backspin from your opponent, whether from a push or a serve, the more you need to accelerate and rotate your racket head. So, should this racket head rotation be a large motion or a small one? It's a very small, compact movement. For a forehand loop, a huge rotation is wrong. Think of a clock face, you're brushing from 5 o'clock to 2 o'clock, not swinging all the way from 5 to 11. The movement is very small, just a quick brush, 5, 4, 3, 2. This is separate from your main arm swing. After you've brushed the ball, you should stabilize your wrist and forearm. The follow-through comes from your body rotation and arm swing, shifting your weight, not from swinging your arm to a specific clock position. The backhand is the same idea. Imagine brushing from 7 o'clock up to 10 o'clock. Don't over-rotate, or you'll lose all the power from your body. For a hook serve, you must use the racket head to generate force. But the actual movement is tiny, and that small motion alone won't send the ball over or create a threat. That's why you need to use your arm to propel the ball forward, while the actual friction-generating part of the racket head movement is extremely small. If you make the racket head rotation too large, or worse, use your arm to create that angle, you're completely negating the power of the racket head itself. Therefore, using the racket head requires inch power, a short, explosive burst over a very small range of motion. It needs to be explosive and fast. The motion can be very small, but it must be quick. A large, slow movement is completely ineffective. This principle applies to everything: your forehand, backhand, hook serve, sidespin serves, and even your pushes. Next, let's talk about how to make this action more focused and explosive. Watch me loop this ball. Am I using my racket head? Yes, I am. So how do I get the racket head to accelerate so quickly from slow to fast? It comes from the fingers. Look at the difference. This is using the wrist, and this is using the fingers. Using your fingers has huge benefits, especially speed. See that blur? That's from my fingers. If I use my wrist or forearm, the motion is much slower. Now, the main reason players can't lift heavy backspin is because their racket speed is too slow to counter the spin. Think of it this way: if the heavy backspin acts in 0.2 seconds, but your swing takes 0.5 seconds without finger power, you're too slow. You can't overcome the spin. But by using your fingers, you can match that speed. If the spin is 0.2 seconds, your fingers can react in 0.2 seconds. The fingers allow for the fastest possible forward and upward brushing motion. This is why the heavier the spin on the ball, the more crucial it is to use your fingers. That tiny, fast motion is enough to lift the heaviest backspin. I'm not afraid of how much spin they put on it, because I know my fingers can generate enough friction to control it. Why do so many amateur players hit a plateau? Because against low spin balls, they can get away with just using their arm. But at a higher level, every rotation of the racket head must be initiated and controlled by your fingers. Do not use your forearm to rotate the racket head. The command to rotate must come from your fingers. After that initial finger action, you lock your wrist and forearm, and then use your entire body, forearm, upper arm, to drive through the ball. That's the complete motion. So today, we've broken down why professional players always emphasize using finger power. This is the key. The power must originate from the fingers driving the wrist. There's a world of difference between passively moving your wrist and actively using your fingers to generate force. Once you master this, you'll truly understand the importance of everything we've discussed today.